has been another decade of horror, and what a wild ride these last 10 years have been. It's like watching a little gory demon baby transform into a majestic adult harpy. Oh, they grow up so fast, with all sorts of landmark films making it to our screens along the way. Sequels and gimmicky franchises might have been a major presence at the top of the box office, but horror continues to encourage inventive storytelling and a special kind of creepy creativity nonetheless. And as the genre has definitely been at the top of its game, there have been plenty of quality titles that have slipped through the cracks, missed their spot on the radar, or had a short time in the sun before being unduly forgotten about. How sad. Of course though, dear watcher, never fear, as a handful of the countless horror movies that deserve more are getting their time to shine right here. Whilst not all of them can get a spot, as we only have room for 10, these are some of the bigger titles that earn their spooky stripes with little reward. But there is plenty of room for more to be added in the comments section below. You know what to do. For now though, I am the ever-aging Ash from What Culture, and these are the 10 most underrated horror movies of the decade. 10. Green Room, 2016. Starting off big, Green Room deserves a hell of a lot more love than it has had in the few years since its release. It is nasty, sadistic, and incredibly sharp, with a brilliant eye for tension and a delightfully against-type performance by the usually lovable Patrick Stewart. When a punk band become trapped in a venue by neo-Nazi skinheads, fighting fire with fire, or blood with blood, is the only way they're gonna survive. Calling a movie Heart in Your Mouth feels overused for horror movies, partly because it sounds so good in marketing, and partly because it sounds a bit gross probably, but this film absolutely fits that suspenseful moniker. Green Room has rightly gone on to be a cult hit since its bafflingly poor release at the box office, but still doesn't seem to get the right sort of praise that it deserves, as cynics question its comparative lack of character development. But if films, and horror films in particular, are judged on what they make you feel rather than classic narrative structures, this is an instant winner. What's a little development in place of box cutters and angry dogs? 9. Cheap Thrills, 2013. The status of Cheap Thrills as an outright horror movie is probably up for debate. But considering the nasty, gory film solely in terms of director E.L. Katz's creative agenda, it absolutely must be taken as one. He intended to make a party movie that felt like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and his blend of pitch black humour, tension, and savage escalation make for horribly compelling viewing. Offering an insightful commentary on the modern fetishization of reward no matter what the cost, the film sees two estranged friends invited to a sort of jackass on steroids game of extreme dares by a wealthy couple. The rich pair are intent on a Hunger Games race to the most gnarly tasks possible, and as the stakes get higher, blood pours freer, with both players turning to their animalistic natures. It's a horror of circumstances with lots of perverse comedy thrown in, and the fact that it remains so widely unseen is an absolute travesty. 8. Absentia, 2011. Nothing sells horror like the simple, creepy idea of someone disappearing. And nothing is creepier than someone disappearing and then mysteriously reappearing again, but changed. As much as Jesus might subvert that trope, Absentia isn't a horror movie about the Bible. It's an underseen, independent chiller about a pregnant woman whose husband disappears and then disturbingly turns back up. Annoyingly, right as she's about to have him declared dead in absentia and get it on with her new boyfriend. Made by Mike Flanagan, well before he made a name for himself as one of the most talented horror movie directors working today, it is a film that predates his excellent work on Oculus, Push, and Gerald's Game, kickstarting a career that has been nothing short of incredible ever since. Absentia doesn't need much to be unnerving when it has got such a compelling central mystery. It draws audiences in with an inventive, original story that's part body snatchers and part boogeyman, and deserves a lot more of the positive attention Flanagan's later films have received. 7. Tucker and Dale vs. Evil, 2010. Who says horror can't be funny? Well, The Cabin in the Woods gets the lion's share of praise when it comes to transformative, meta-horror movies. Tucker and Dale vs. Evil is arguably even smarter and even more affectionate. Partly because it didn't seek to deconstruct the horror industry in quite the same way Joss Whedon did. But still, it is just as deserving of some love. The film takes the age-old convention of classic backwoods horror tropes and tells it from an entirely different perspective, as two hapless hillbillies, played by the wonderful Alan Tudyk and Tyler Labine, end up wrongly accused of being psychopathic murderers over a misunderstanding. Several ludicrous accidental deaths later, they're misinterpreted by a group of kids as being on a murder spree. It is simply genius. Tudyk and Labine are so charming that it is an effortlessly rewatchable delight, and needs all the more attention as a lasting horror comedy. 6. Caliber, 2018. Blurring the lines between horror and thriller, 2018's Scottish delight Caliber was 9 years in the making, and it's hard not to believe that it was entirely worth the wait. Based on the same eternal anxiety around outsiders and insular communities like Eden Lake and The Wicker Man, it focuses on a hunting trip that goes horribly wrong when a child is accidentally killed, and his father is then also killed when he discovers the accident. It's a bit of a variation on a sort of telltale heart tension story, as the two outsiders face the suspicions of the locals and the family of the dead, who already despise city folk whilst waiting for repairs to their car. The pressure builds to near breaking point, with the end a kick in the teeth that really seals the deal. It's certainly not an easy watch, but that's all the more reason for getting it on your screen. 5. Maniac, 2012. Since The Lord of the Rings, Elijah Wood has made far fewer movies than you'd probably expect him to have in the early 2000s. Even more strangely, he seems to have been pretty intent on being unconventional with his choices, which has led to great turns in the likes of Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind and Sin City. You can also add the Maniac remake to that pile, but it doesn't seem to get anything like the appreciation it deserves. In this portrait of psychopathy, Wood plays the titular monster, a young man created by the twisted abuse of his prostitute mother who made him watch her have sex, with the whole thing told from his perspective. Given that he has a thing for killing women and scalping them, it makes for perverse, difficult viewing, since we're basically supposed to empathise with his journey. But it is a great look into a disaffected, unemotional mind, and Wood is rather brilliant at being the big creep. Both the 80s film and its excellent remake deserve a little more love than they were given. 4. Frozen, 2010. No, not that one, despite how horrific a Disney musical might seem to some. Frozen isn't about ghosts or monsters or angry locals, well, unless you count wild animals, or even magical sisters in the snow. It's a simple concept horror movie about 3 skiers who get inadvertently stranded on a ski lift in freezing conditions, and are forced to weigh up freezing to death, falling to their deaths, or being eaten alive by wolves. Or all of the above. Of course, it is an exercise in tension, and has the same sort of awful question as posed by 127 Hours. The option of definite death or possible survival dependent on short-term horrors. Adam Green's direction and a strong script make this way better than it probably deserves to be, given that it's literally a few people just stuck in a lift. Frozen is a slow burner and not exactly flashy, but that absolutely fits the premise. 3. Kill List, 2011. Ben Wheatley's brilliant kill list seems to start as something else entirely, but that is part of the magic. Presenting itself initially as a typical hitman movie following 2 killers, it is pretty brutal. Particularly one bloody hammering that is enough to make even the hardiest watchers cringe. But then it takes a turn to way darker, way more twisted territories that nobody could have predicted, even with Wheatley's name above the door. Kill List is bonkers, and shares some story genetics with the more recent Midsummer, but that is about as much as I can give you spoiler-wise, since it is best to see it without knowing anything about it. It's another of those movies that revels in nastiness and does a damn good job of leaving audiences scratching their heads. The best thing is that Wheatley doesn't allow this story to live solely on its twists. It's well written and performed enough that it makes a mark without them. Whilst this one does get a lot of cult recommendations, it's just a shame that Kill List has never achieved the kind of mainstream appreciation it so richly deserves. 2. The Crazies, 2010. If you manage to remake a horror film and actually improve on the original, you tend to join a special invite-only club full of liquor and velvet walls and mounted body parts instead of deer heads. It's a hard height to hit, but in this case, The Crazies was helped along by the fact that George A. Romero's 1973 original wasn't actually all that great. It had an excellent concept, sure, but it's widely remembered as one of Romero's lesser films, or rather, not remembered at all. In other words, it was ripe for adaptation, which Breck Eisner did with a couple attempting to flee an infection zone in which a biological weapon has transformed residents into violent killers. It offers an interesting variation on the typical zombie film formula, bringing all sorts of weird thrills along the way. The Crazies was both modestly critically successful and did okay at the box office, at least making some money. But considering how many inferior zombie-type films are way more popular, it is a bit of a travesty. 1. Unsane, 2018. Considering Steven Soderbergh retired from filmmaking in early 2013, he has made an awful lot of films this decade. Some might say he's making gimmick releases, but that's no bad thing when his unconventional approach to releasing leads to things like Unsane, the horror film he shot on an iPhone in secret. I repeat, the horror film he shot on an iPhone in secret. You listen to it again and then wonder why this film isn't the talk of absolutely everyone who has ever had any sort of affection for the genre. Sure, it was critically lauded for the story and Claire Foy's performance, but something that very much should have been a selling point, the astonishing achievement of making it the way he did, ended up being a reductive qualifier instead. Take away the iPhone gimmick though, and you still have a Hitchcockian treat that should be way more widely cherished. For what the movie is, it deserves way more than its due. Whether you love it or hate it, it really did do something new that the genre had never seen before, and should be way higher on the world's watch list because of it. And that's our list. What other underrated horrors from 2010 onwards belong up here? Share all of your thoughts in the comment section below. I've been Ash and this has been What Culture. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe and come back again soon for some more spine-tingling horror content. Thanks for watching.